All right, we're going to try to pick back up where we left off. So let's see, the last thing we did was go ahead and commit all of our changes that were out there. So let's go ahead and just run it and make sure where we left off here. So at this point, we have our stock tickers up here at the top. We have it collecting our data in and sorting that so that we can sort our days here. And we also did a little bit of adjustments to do less than 10 of whatever the lowest is and more than 10 or plus 10 rather to whatever the highest was. The idea there was to give a little buffer space so that all these graphs look somewhat uniform, even though the closing prices can vary, right? So if we did a hard coded like we did the first time, things that are in the 500s are not going to look as clean as something in the 40s or something like that. Okay, and you'll notice when we ran this again, it went back and found those days. And we still have our total of 10 trading days. Now we are starting at 0, and that could probably be fine because technically this would be 9 here, giving us 10 total data points. So that still maps exactly to what this is requesting up here. So we plot those 5 graphs, and we can add as much information as we want. Let's go back and look at those graphs. So we've got closing price over here. We've got days traded ago down here. That's fine. That's one way to put it. Another thing that we could do is go ahead and put the stock ticker up here at the top. That at least makes sense, right? So let's look back in our documentation on how to deal with matplotlib. So let's open that up. And if we scroll down here, you could set up our Y entry, X entry that we all have. Should allow us to show the name of the actual, like this here. We could have just title. The subtitle would be another one that was just going to have one over this whole thing, but I believe it's just straight title if we want to do it. Figure, plots, shows. Yeah, just title. So we could do plt.title, and let's do something like this. So we would say plt.title, and we would want to put something like our stock in there. We could do it that way. Let's see what that does. All right, and so you can see it put the little stock ticker up at the top, gives us a nice little information up there. You can, again, keep playing with these. You can adjust colors. You can do all sorts of stuff. For this time, you don't have to get too fancy, just enough to make it reasonable on this side, right? So we need a title for X and Y. We need to make sure that we have the overall title of the program. So that all looks good. Let's see here. Feel free to add information. It's been a while since I wrote these, so I'm going to go back and look. Minimum 10 data points, and we have that covered. So you're good there. We want to save these graphs in a folder called charts, right? All lowercase charts. Again, capitalization, punctuation, everything matters when we deal with this because everything's case sensitive here. We also want to save them out as PNG files. You are to not upload those to your project folder, and the project should save those when it executes. You may want to add this folder to your git ignore. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll come over here to our top level folder. We're going to right click, go new, and do a directory. We're going to call it charts. Hit enter. And then we want to add this charts to our git ignore. There's a couple ways to do that. We can edit our git ignore and do something like this where ignore our charts folder. And you could just do something like charts slash. And if that's done, then that will go ahead and allow this to work. That's one way to do it. The other way to do this is if you close your git ignore, just go to your charts, right click, go to git, and then on the add git ignore, click on the git ignore button. And what that will do is just add it down to the bottom. Notice I missed a slash, by the way, earlier. There should be a slash chart slash. If it works, you should notice that this goes to kind of an orange color, and that means it's part of the git ignore file and won't ever upload anything. All right. So that part's done. Now what we want to do is actually save this stock ticker out or save this graph out. So we currently show it there's more directives that will allow us to actually save that figure. So let's scroll down here because you can see there again, working with text, we can add all sorts of things in here, however you want to do it. There's lots of extra features. So to save this, let's see here. It's, I believe, just .save. I just want to make sure that you show you where it's at in the documentation here. Let's do this. Examples. And we're going to do a simple line graph, but I want to save. There we go. Okay, and so you have the .save directive there, okay? And so with that plt.save, it wants to have a file name. And then if you want to set other things here, you could set that as well. By default, it's going to go ahead and write it out as a PNG file. You can see that. You could put it to a video. You could do it to JavaScript. There's a couple different ways that you can end up saving that out there. But that does what we need to do. This one is actually for an animation, which is not exactly what we're after. We just want to save the PLT. So let's try that again. Let's see. I don't want animations. You'll notice there's a bunch of different stuff you can do over here to save it out. Let's see, we just want to save it out as an image. Excuse me. All right, so showing you in the documentation isn't what I want to do. It's obviously not coming up the way I want it. Let's see here, saving. All right. Save fig, that's the part. I knew it was save, but I couldn't remember what it was. All right, so save fig. And all you got to do is add that right here below your show. So do your show so that we can see it still over here, but then go ahead and save it. And then in terms of the name, we want to save it as our stock name. So to do that, we will use a F statement so that this first part here is going to be our stock. All right. And what that does is plug that name into this string and then save it as a .png. We want to make sure that also goes into our charts file, right? So we want to put that into charts / and that should go ahead and save it in there. All right, so let's run that. And if all goes correctly, we should see them. And under our charts folder, you'll also see that those files showed up. And that allows me to go see those, okay? Let's see here. I'll notice that those were actually empty. So let's make sure they're not empty, in which case they are. So we want to do our save before our show. Let's do that. Now run it. Looks good. Let's try these. And now you can see that they matched up the way they're supposed to. Okay? Because the moment you show it, that pretty much wipes everything on that figure. So it's an order thing. All right. So that all looks good. Let's pull back up our main. Let's close our plots out here. Sure that's all clean. This looks good. So now let's go ahead and go into our commit and we will update this last little piece. Again, we could use the AI to kind of have it generate to us if we wanted to, or we could comment ourselves. So it'd be something like added charts folder and put in get ignore. added feature to save plots as a PNG. But again, the language here is whatever makes sense to you. It does need to be the more descriptive, the better, but you also don't want this to be like 4 paragraphs. It needs to be short and sweet. So we'll commit and push.
Hey, Jason.
Yeah.
So on that charts folder, I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. The reason that we are adding that to the get ignore is so when you run it, it just creates our charts, right? Do I
Correct.
understand that correctly? Okay.
Yep. Now you're going to find when we actually check this, and that's what I want you guys to do here shortly, is to check and run your code because it will run. But when I check out your code, it's going to have a little bit of a problem because there is no charts folder, right? Because we added it to the get ignore. So therefore, when we submit this up here, for example, going out here to GitHub, and we look at that project, you'll notice that there is no charts folder up here. Even though we just pushed to it, we can see it right here, added that charts folder to the get ignore. And we look at our main code, we can see that that's supposed to be there. But if I check this out and run it, it's going to say charts folder doesn't exist. All right. So we need to add a little bit of code to add that charts folder if it doesn't exist. All right. Does anybody remember how to do that from 360?
I was looking at yesterday, but I get distracted.
Anybody online? No worries. Let's go back to the 360 course. Okay. We'll scroll down, and down here we want to go with reading and writing files, or in this case, organizing files. And inside this, we can see how we would go ahead and use the shutil in order to write a file out. Here's how we would copy folders, permanently deleting files, walking a tree, adding zip files, walking. It's actually going to be in the chapter before that, 10. Creating new folders. So we do OS, right? So we can import OS. And we can run the os.makeDirs, and then we have to actually pass it the full amount. Or does anybody remember what this is called here? This would be considered the full path or the absolute path. We could use a relative path to create that as well. You can also use the matplot or the pathlib library, which is probably a little better for us to use. And we can use the make dir on that side as well. Okay. And it will only make one dir at a time unless you pass parent. So if we wanted it to have multiple ones, we would do that too. So in other words, you can either do the OS dirs, make dirs one, or you could use the math or the pathlib. So pathlib is generally the more recommended one these days. So we'll add that up there at the top. We'll grab this little path command down here. And so before we get started, we will run that command there. Obviously, we don't want it in our user's OWL folder. We would simply say charts. Okay. Everybody get how that works? So let's run that.
Do we need any slashes or anything on that charts? Or is it just literally just the word charts?
Just charts will work, but you'll also notice you'll get an error that can't do it because it already exists, right? So we want to check to see if it exists first. And then if not, we want to do that. So we would run something like if, and how do we check that file? Anybody know? Anybody have any ideas? Something like this, right? Checking path validity. So we can call whatever that path is, and then we can say p dot exists true if the path exists, false if it does not. Okay, so we could do something like this to see if it actually exists, in which case we would do this back here. So we could say charts equals path charts. Okay, and we could say like if charts dot exists, then, or if not, right? Then we could run this path command. Does that kind of make sense? So we'll document this, create charts folder if it does not exist. Now, if we run this, it runs as expected, the files are there, and it makes sure that that folder's existed. So now when I commit this out there, we'll commit and push. And if that folder doesn't exist, in other words, when you check out the code, it would go ahead and create the charts folder for you and not actually push that stuff up. And so I'll show you here, once we're all done, how to go back and check out your own code to make sure that it's going to work from scratch. That way, when you hand it to me, you know everything's going to be working solid. Okay, and I'll have to take a bunch of points off, kind of thing. So we're good there. We got the charts folder working the way it's supposed to. There should be a minimum of 5 commits. Be sure to commit often. We clearly have pretty close to that now. We have right at 5 commits. We're going to be adding some more stuff, so we're going to easily go over that commit option. Again, yesterday, we probably should have done some more commits along the way to explain what's going on there. On this side, the next one is I'll be checking out your main branch. Make sure to include your requirements.txt file containing all the packages that need to be installed. Note that you have to have this spelling correctly on this side. If you create this file, that should be file, not file, with the output of pip freeze at the command prompt. So we did that once, right? We have this requirements.txt. Sometimes when you work on these long projects, you can do this initially, but you kind of want to go in and do it after you add any new packages. It's always best to do it at the very end of your project, right? That makes sure that the pip requirements file is up to the latest and greatest. So to do that, you use pip freeze greater than requirements.txt, and that will overwrite this file with the latest requirements. So if there was some reason there was a change in there, this would turn blue and there would be some adjustments in this pip freeze file. Okay, so that's done. We've got those points. So the very last points here, which is worth 20 points, it's a pretty good chunk, is to make sure that there's a README file in your project and it explains what your project is, how to install the pip requirements, and how to execute the program and use that GitHub flavor markdown. Well, we already started one here, so now we just need to go back and fill everything out, okay? So we already have a good title here at the top. Let's see, project file, just a simple overview of its purpose. And so you could give a nice little description of what's going in. In this case, we're going to say something like Mini Project 1 to stock tickers, something like that. Okay. And in this description, you could give it a nice little description of what it would be. So there again, you can write it or you can have AI write it, however you want to do it here. But you could say something like this program will look up 5 stock tickers and will present the user with 5 graphs. Those graphs are automatically saved in the charts folder, something like that. All right. There again, the more detailed you give this, the more oomph you give it, it's going to look better for future employers when you do this. If you're using this, GitHub repository on your resume, that kind of thing. So you want to be pretty descriptive as to what's going on there. Dependency wise, we just say that we need to install certain things. So this would be your pip install instructions. So does anybody know what we need to do for those pip install? So here we need to set up code. So you do 3 of those backtick marks, and that's the one by your one on your keyboard typically. All right. And inside there, we want to put in the code that we would use for this. So this would be something like, and in here we would have pip install -r requirements.txt. And what that does is use that requirements file to install all the pip packages that you need. All right. So that looks good. And then from there, we need to install it. We don't need to do anything on this actually for the installation piece of it. And you could put something here on the text side and just say something like, please install the pip requirements. Okay. And you can do a colon, and then it'll do a nice old code. And then to execute the program, you would give a code block of whatever they need to do in order to run your program. So for ours, it's pretty simple. We would just have our 3 here. And we'd say something like Python main.py. All right. This one's fairly straightforward. We're not doing anything fancy at this point. So that works in there. And the help, you could keep that if you need that. If you don't have a help section, just remove it. Authors, you could go ahead and put your information here if you have anybody. So you could just say Jason Zeller, because that's my name. Make sure you use your name. You could also check your version history, just make it the initial release. If you choose to license this, which we're not really dealing with, let's go ahead and take that out. And then acknowledgement. So in this case, you would want to put anything that you got code snippets from, if you got help from ChatGPT, et cetera, you would just document this here. So in Markdown, what you do is you put the text that you want the user to see in the square brackets, and in parentheses right behind it, you give it the actual URL, right? So in this case, we don't really have anything other than if we chose to, we could point something to like the matplotlib help text here. So let's just do that for the sake of showing you how to do this. So we would say something like matplotlib documentation. Replace this URL with that. Anything else you guys can think of we used? I can think of at least one more.
Finance.
Yep, Y-Finance is one. So we could go look at the Y-Finance.
Are you wanting us to put the SciPy and NumPy documentation as well?
No.
Or is it just the stuff that we actually used?
Just the stuff you use. And in this case, that kind of covers the Y-Finance because it's part of that install. So
okay.
To me, these are the ones that make sense. The matplotlib documentation and the Y-Finance documentation, which would be this stuff here. Okay, so we can grab that URL and we could just say Y-Finance. In this case, you guys didn't really use any particular code and credits, but it's nice to put it there because you could also reference somebody out to go use those if they want to manipulate your program, right? So it's good to just throw those links down at the bottom. All right, we're going to throw this, take this out, and we got some acknowledgements down there. Okay.
So Jason, on those 3 backticks that you did, is that just how you, I'm assuming that's a comment in Markdown? Do I understand that correctly?
It's a code block in Markdown. So to see what this looks like, if you click on this one right here in the middle that says editor and preview, you'll actually get to see what it looks like as an end result. So the way Markdown works is a single one is going to be a header, a double one is a subheader, a triple one is a third header down. It just adjusts the size and the font going down. Like these are a third because these aren't really comment blocks up here. So I tend to have people just put that up at the top. But you'll notice it kind of offsize it. So you could use single ones up here, but it kind of makes it really big and bold. So that's the reason I have the 3 that we did up there before, is it just kind of gives an appropriate font size at the top of the program. But that's that. This is what those 3 backticks do. So the idea behind that is when I'm using this, you'll notice as I mouse over, I can copy that to my clipboard so that I can dump and paste it right into a terminal without having to retype it. That's the beauty of using the code blocks. But we get an idea of what that looks like. We can test our links. If I click on it, we can see that the URLs are coming up correctly. Yep, that looks good on that one too. Perfect. And then this last one just shows you the whole thing there. But sometimes when you're doing the README thing, it's kind of nice to have this middle one where you can see both sides. So if this all looks good, then we can come back out here and we can say updated README file. Commit push. Push. Okay. So then we come out here to GitHub. Let's make sure everything looks good there. Let's refresh. Great. So we've got our text up there. We can see it nice in order to do pip install and the requirements, how to execute the program. And because of that, I can simply click copy, come down here and actually paste that right down here at the bottom. And we can see it works as we would expect. Now, when you run it out of a terminal, you're actually going to get this figure that pops up, and you can zoom in and you can do some other stuff here that you don't necessarily have in this PyCharm one. When you close it, it's going to bring up the next one. So you actually have to go through each one of those charts. And then it's done. And if you actually checked your folder, you would have those pictures up there for me to pull as well. Okay. If you didn't want those to show up, what you could do is go into your main folder, just remove the plot show. And you could do something like just print down to the user. Saving, let's do it this way with an F statement. Stock. I have a print statement down here that would say something like all done. Sure, why not? So we run this and you'll notice everything works, but down here and below, it's going to tell us which stock file it's saved and that it's all done. Okay. If we ran it from the command line, we would get the same approach down here where it runs everything and then does all done. Okay. So you can have it show it to the user. I prefer you do that for the time being, but you don't necessarily have to do that because we have it now saving those pictures out that the user could go pull. All right. That meets all of the requirements that are needed for this first project. Anybody have any questions on that? Oh, last thing that you should do is come out here. This all looks good, right? So now what we want to do is go to code and we're going to copy this particular link. So let's copy that. Let's go back to our project and we're going to go to the 3 bars and say project from version control. On the repository URL this time, we're going to go ahead and paste in our URL. You notice that in the directory, it has this in here. You're going to want to add something in there, right? We don't want to override the existing project. We're checking back out your project from fresh to make sure that it runs if somebody else was to check out your code. So I'm going to add just ASDF here for the time being and hit clone. That's going to copy down my project.
So you're essentially pulling the project from the repository to a local repository?
Correct. I'm checking it back out as if I was somebody else using my code.
Okay.
And so here you'll notice when you do that, you're going to get prompted in PyCharm with a screen that says, do you want to go ahead and create a virtual environment for this? And oh, by the way, I notice you have a requirements file. Do you want me to go ahead and download those? And I can say yes or okay at that point. And so it will automatically create a virtual environment for my case. And then it's going to go through and try to install these packages. And we can watch this and see what it does. You can see down here, it's grabbing all those packages automatically for me. Otherwise, I would need to run this pip install -r requirements file. All right. PyCharm is kind of auto doing that for you when you first get it set up because it found it in the main program. So it's almost done there. And of course, we can see our README. So we would read through this, make sure everything works like we would expect it to do it. In this case, we could go to the terminal. And you'll notice when I brought this up, that virtual VNV is not over here, right? That's because this is still setting up the interpreter. So we want to close that terminal for now. Make sure that this finishes before we try to jump the gun.
Hey, Jason, I got a quick question
Yeah.
when it's doing that. So I ended up getting a branch in my commit history because what I did, I appended one of the commit um, because I had a typo in the message. So I appended the commit, the last commit, and fixed that message, and then but it ended up created a branch when I tried to push it to the GitHub. It was saying the GitHub head is different than the local head, so I had to kind of pull from GitHub to do the sync and then do the push again, which ended up creating one branch.
Is it
Not necessarily a branch, but
yeah.
it looked like a branch, but the branch doesn't have any name on it.
Yeah,
Like,
it's not a branch. It's just you basically shelved the code at your point in time, which you could do.
mhm.
Your best way to resolve that kind of stuff is if you come up here, you can do a couple things. You can take your local code and you can do a merge from your stuff back to the original one, or you can rebase your local machine back to whatever's out
Oh,
there on GitHub.
okay.
You could also do a pull to basically bring it in there as well. Sometimes you can do a checkout and that will pull the latest one that was there too. And then you can see it check out the branch down here at the bottom. And then you can sometimes go in here and hit merge if it needs to merge new results.
Okay.
That would do it. Or you could do an update and it would pull the latest stuff out there from GitHub as well. So yeah, when it gets a little bit out of sync, it can be a little difficult to follow. The best thing to do, like if you had a typo and whatever is in there, just do a new commit or something. You were doing it in the commit message.
Yeah.
Yeah. On that case, you could either do it in your PyCharm or you could come up here and edit that particular branch in GitHub, and that would keep that from being an issue between the two.
Okay.
Once you make a change up here, make sure that you pull the update down here. So you can come down here and do an update, and that makes sure your local one is up to date as well.
Yep.
So
Thanks
Jason,
for explaining that.
Yep, no problem. I've done that more times than I can count.
Jason, that update, like, when you and I talked a few days ago that some of this stuff I'm going to do at work, some of it I'm going to do at home. So is that update like how I would get the most up-to-date files, or do I need to pull each time?
Nope, you just need to do an update. So if you committed to the main branch on GitHub from one machine, you can come in here, go to your main and do an update, and it would pull down the latest from GitHub down to your machine.
Okay.
Just make sure you don't already have some changes. So always come in here and check and make sure there's no changes. Then come on here and do your main and update. If you have changes and you forgot to commit off one machine and you already made commits off another machine, you'll end up having to go through the merge process, which is making sure which file you want to be submitted kind of thing.
Okay.
Usually the best way to do that is to go ahead and you already have your other ones. So you would pull down the latest and then you would merge those changes into your local, which there's an option here. It pops up when you need to merge. You could go ahead and merge that, and then it will tell you there's a conflict on this file. Here's the changes. Which one do you want to keep, kind of thing.
Okay.
But it'll walk you through on that side. So in this case, this is a brand new project. Note I don't have a charts folder or anything else over here. I could come down to my terminal. Notice that now I have my virtual environment, and it does show my mini project one, blah, 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 down here at the bottom. I would want to do a pip install -r requirements.txt just to make sure that everything got installed correctly. If it did, you should see these requirements are already satisfied. If that worked, we could go ahead and run our python.main.py, enter, and you'll notice we got our chart. We can go ahead and close it. Note that the one that's pushed out there, we still had the show in it. So this all looks good. We can go ahead and close these off. And then over here on the left, you'll notice charts is now there, and it went ahead and added those files in like it's supposed to. All right. I recommend you do this right before you say my project's done kind of thing. Go check out the code as a random file over here and test it and run it. When this works and everything works like you want it to, you can go ahead and delete that project if you so choose to do so. So to do that, you would just close out of that project. It stores everything in your PyCharm projects folder. So I have this ASDF one. I could click the three dots here even and remove from recent projects. If I want to delete those, I just come into Show and Explore. And it did it in a different window. That's one here. And you could just delete that entire folder as we don't need it. It was just a test to make sure that GitHub has had everything it needed.
So essentially, this is what you would do when we submit the link, right?
You got it. Yep. So what you would do at this point is come in here to Mini Project 1, and you would go ahead and do your submission, which of course, let me change it to the student view. So let's see, week 4, Mini Project 1, and you would go to View Instructions, and down here in this submission, you would copy and paste this URL up here. So the URL I want you to submit is not with this tree main in it. I want just GitHub, your name, your GitHub name, your username, and then the name of the project. So this should be the URL that you submit to me. Just copy it, come into here, paste it in for me here, hit enter. So that'll create it as a link for me automatically, and then hit submit. And yep, we're good. Hit submit. And then we are good at that point in time. You can close that, and I will see it on my side. So on my side, when I come look, I see this URL. All I have to do is copy and paste that, come in here to this, go to, let's see here, projects, I would say close, or clone repository actually would have been the one that I picked there. But I come into my PyCharm and do this here where I dump in your URL here. It should find everything. I hit clone, and then I check out and do that same process you just did. So that's how I end up grading it. You want to submit this on Sunday, no matter what. All right. Even if you're not done yet or whatever else, just submit this link out here. Okay. If you need a little extra time, whatever, go ahead and email me. But at least this URL is already posted out here in your Blackboard. And then I will go through and start grading those on my side as quick as possible so you can get some feedback. In this case, I will probably go ahead and start grading them pretty quickly next week because you have these 2 videos to get the work done. If you can't get it in by Sunday.
You adjust your time schedule.
Right. You should adjust something because you've got 2 videos that'll walk you right through it. All right.
Hey, Jason, I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So this is regarding the object-oriented programming for Python.
Uh-huh.
How familiar we need to be in order to do well in this class with object-oriented programming? Because the more I'm studying, it's just never ending. Just too many things.
It goes on forever. So what I care about, you don't have to be a professional with those. If you notice, every time, even if I forget something in the class here, I'm going to go back to my documentation. That's what matters. So as long as you know how to go look up documentation, I'm fine with that. I'm not looking for you to memorize all the classes, all the different options, the methods, et cetera, et cetera. I need you to do this piece of it. When it comes to the object-oriented piece, you don't, like, these projects aren't necessarily written in object-oriented, right? You're using objects like PLT objects in order to do different variables on it, like we did, .show, .title, et cetera. That's object-oriented in that piece, but you're not actually writing the objects.
Correct. It's already been done.
Yeah, exactly. And frankly, again, that's part of most of your Python scripts. Now, if you need to write it, like for example, in your final project, you need to do something where you create your own objects, you could absolutely do that. But that's the reason I'm teaching you these other frameworks like Streamlit and Flask and Django, is because you don't necessarily need to write those objects. There's built-in tools and methods for that to be done for you. And it's not necessarily cheating because you're using them within a framework. Does that make sense? So for example, when you do this in Flask, if you use their object methods, then you're always going to have that same information for consistency. If it doesn't have what you need, you absolutely have to write it from scratch. And we'll actually have to do that in Django and Flask for something that isn't built in, so to speak. You have to write it yourself for that.
Okay.
But do you need to be a wizard at OOP? No, not at all. The key in this class that I try to stress the most is know how to look something up. All right. You're never going to memorize it. Know what's the appropriate source to go look something up. Like you'll notice when I did the path exist thing or waited there, I waited to Google the show thing, right? Go look through my documentation, go find the right way. Because what you'll find is if you start going to forums like Stack Overflow or Reddit or any of these other ones, sometimes they'll have a good answer, but it's never a for sure thing, right? If you find it in the documentation, you know it's the right answer because it's right out of their documentation.
Yep.
So same way with AI. We could have had AI assist us with some of that, could have wrote this program in nothing flat. But the problem is it's going to do it in such an advanced way that it's not going to be basic like what our program just did. Now, if you go look at Y Finance, for example, and you come down and look at that API, here we go. You'll notice that we did just a single ticker in a for loop, but you can actually use their tickers option in order to go find multiple tickers. Then you can save that information and it would save you from having to do multiple for loops. In this case, the API does not charge us per API call, but if it did, it would make sense to use this tickers one. So it's just one call to get all the info we need.
Yep, makes sense.
And that's the reason I had you spend 2 weeks on API was to go through and understand how to go search out these API references. So. Because you can do far more fancy stuff with this API. You could build something in Streamlit like where you're constantly streaming live market data with WebSockets, right? You could build your own little stock dashboard and not just plot the last 10 days, but actually get live data straight from the API and build your own little dashboard. You could do that in the Streamlit project that we're going to do. So.
That'll be awesome.
All right. And I can tell you, you know, when I first started in this, which was, 2018, somewhere in there, I was playing with this pretty hard. By 2019 rolled around, then COVID hit. And I played the stock market a lot during COVID, made money that I didn't know what I was doing with. Not like millions by a long shot, right? I just like threw in $100 in a Robinhood account because that was the cool thing to do back then. That ended up turning into multiple thousand. I can say that. So I took it out, spent it all, and then realized I had to pay taxes on all of that, which was another experience. So
capital gain tax.
Yeah. I was like, oh, I saved enough back for taxes. I did not, in fact, save enough back for taxes. I made a lot of homemade brewing equipment at that point in time is what I bought it all with, and then realized I had sell it all so I can pay the taxes.
Did you keep it for long term or short term?
Some of it was long term, some was short term. I actually put a lot into 401k and stuff when I did that, but it was mostly just trying to learn the stock market and doing the Python side. And during that, if you guys remember during the COVID side, that's when really crazy things were happening, like AMC and all these other ones were just bouncing all over. And what we did is a lot of those were coming from Wall Street Bets on Reddit, right? And so if you watch the Wall Street Bets Reddit, you would get somebody posting some stock ticker, and sure enough, something would happen with that stock ticker, whether it was going up or going down. But as long as somebody posted in there, there was a chance something was going to happen. So I wrote some Python scripts that would sit there and monitor exactly what Wall Street Bets was doing, give me back. It would tell me this ticker. I set up one with fake money account and just automatically had it buy or sell whatever it was telling me to do. That is obviously not a good way to go about it. That account went broke, but again, it was a fake account. What was better in that case is I was following some YouTube channel. I can't remember what it was at this point, but what I found is there was one person in the live stream. And so it's like a 8-hour live stream. The guy gets on in the morning, is there through the entire day when the stock market's opening, talking about what's happening, what's going on. Sometimes he'd give recommendations. They would all kind of purchase together. But what I liked is he had tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in his chat. And those guys were off going and doing research. So if he said something about some stock, you had 10,000 people coming back with whether it was good, bad, or they found other market data about it or something else. It was a massive resource of information coming in. But there was always one guy that seemed to know something ahead of everybody else. It never failed. He would say a stock ticker, and within you had like 20 seconds to either purchase or something, and it would just skyrocket every single time. So I used some Python to tap into the YouTube's API so that I could get the chat as it would flow through. And in that live chat, I would search specifically for his name. And when his name came up, it sent off an alarm on my machine, a literal alarm, like a wave file of an alarm going off. It was actually a ching of a register, but later down the road. So if I heard the ching sound, I would immediately look at my machine. It would have a little window, give me the stock ticker, and I could go make an execution on Robinhood. That actually made a couple $1,000s doing that for whatever reason. And what I come to find out over time is his biggest source of news was Twitter at the time. And he had all these different people in what was called a Twitter fall. And I don't know if Twitter fall is still a thing anymore. Yeah, it's still a thing. So what this is you pump it, and it looked a little bit different back then. Yeah, it's actually died. What you could do was pump a bunch of different, you created a Twitter account, you followed a bunch of people in there, and then it would fall with just those people that you had associated with that account. So I created one that was just associated with big names in stock markets, or things like Elon Musk would be in there, and a bunch of other Kathy, whatever, for all of her stuff she was trading at the time. What's the main, the senator that seems to come up with lots of money all the time? What is her name?
Pelosi.
Yes, Nancy Pelosi. You would follow her Twitter and a bunch of other stuff in there. And you just put all these people together, and you would have it sort by stock tickers. And what was nice is if I looked for, $AMC, and I would see if any of those people were talking about it, if it was starting to build up enough, I would get enough information. Well, you could also have it strip all of those stock tickers out when somebody did that. So they could be tweeting about randomness, but they would always do stock tickers with a $, whatever, right? Stock ticker. Long story short, this was a great way to learn Python and deal with a bunch of different APIs, because the goal was to make money, right? And let's see if it actually worked. And it did. I made several thousand doing it that way. So
cool.
But that actually all started from that original YouTube I showed you on, what's his name? He showed you how to do a bunch of stock ticker stuff. In that first video, I think I showed you guys, that was a great resource for getting started in some of that as a dashboard. And then I tweaked it for what I really wanted. So I took that same concept to build a dashboard that monitors all my 401ks, all my retirement accounts, everything else, because they're splattered out across different companies. having worked for multiple companies over the years. And it gave me one dashboard that I could check every single day, which I don't recommend checking your stock accounts every single day. It'll drive yourself nuts, but it was a good way to see, did I leave money in a cash account and I meant to actually go buy stock that month or something like that. It was a great way to invest and learn.
But once we are done with this project, we could, I mean, not to that extent, but we could put like the stuff we invest in this project and see the last, however, see the charts.
Absolutely.
Is that something that if I decided I wanted to do that, probably wait till you're done grading before I do that, so it doesn't have doesn't have the 5 tickers in it?
Yeah, or you could clone that project out and save it as a different project name, right? You could call it ticker or something, and you could use those files as a basis for that project. You could
actually, when I check out my own code, I could do it that way, right?
Yep.
After I make sure it works, I could put in what I actually invest in.
Yeah, and it would be like in your local, just on your local machine. You wouldn't be pushing the code up, kind of thing.
I don't want to give away my secrets. You'll blame me for losing money.
And you'll notice in some of the old videos, I add you to where you actually prompt the user to give you 5 stock tickers, and then it would go find those 5 and then pull those 5 out, and as opposed to the ones I have submitted in here. I don't want you guys doing that. I want you to put whatever 5 you're interested in there, because it sounds silly, but when I had 65 people in this class, that added 2 to 3 minutes per student in order to go type in those 5 stock tickers. And then you compound that by 65. I lost a couple hours just typing in the same 5 stock tickers every time. Thankfully I don't teach that many at once like I was during those semesters, but it sounds simple, but it compounds really fast. Cool. Well, I think I'll go ahead and stop that video.